Now remember the appalling cases 10 years ago, and Rochdale was one of those northern towns afflicted. Grooming gangs, underage girls sexually abused on pretty much an industrial scale. Luckily, in the end, the forces of the law did work, having been much criticised to begin with for perhaps turning a blind eye to something that was going on for fear of being thought racist. And the problem was even more acute because so many of the men involved were people from Pakistan, and that made talking about it even more difficult. But yesterday, an immigration tribunal ruled that two of the men heavily involved in the trafficking and sexual exploitation of young girls, two of them who, due to be deported, will now not be deported because it would infringe their human rights if they're sent back to Pakistan. No matter about the human rights of the girls, the young girls that lived in Rochdale, it is because we are still signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights. I think the whole thing is pretty appalling. And joining me is Maggie Oliver, best known for being a former detective constable in the Greater Manchester Police and for exposing the Rochdale child grooming scandal. Maggie, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Nigel. Thank you for having me on.
Well, not at all, and well done you for the work you did, the brave work you did in exposing all of this, and I suppose getting convictions in court, putting these men in prison was part of your success story. But how do you feel, given that the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, said very clearly these people should be deported, and now, after lengthy legal battles, they're going to be allowed to stay? How does that make you feel?
I don't see this case as a success on any level, from the charges to the convictions to the time spent in prison to this latest fiasco. And actually, my understanding, Nigel, is that the two men have not had a decision. But what has happened is that one of the three who was ordered to be deported he accessed a legal loophole. So 5 days before this got to court, he reneged on his Pakistani citizenship. And so for 4 years, the Home Secretary and Sajid Javid have known that he was not going to be deported. That has only just come to light. And the other two abusers who are fighting deportation have argued that because he isn't being deported, nor should they be. And the other thing that makes me so angry is that one of the abusers, Adil Khan, who got a 13-year-old child pregnant where we had a fetus and DNA, he's got the cheek to even say that he's entitled to a family life, that his son deserves a role model. The whole system is broken.
That's unbelievable.
It's shocking. It just, this case exposes time and time again the failures in our criminal justice system. And, my take on it is that these men gave up their human rights when they did what they did. Where are the human rights of the victims? What about the children who walk around, they're young women now, walk around Rochdale every day in danger of coming face to face with their abusers? Where are their human rights? And our whole system is flawed. There is no equality. It is not balanced.
Well,
it is all, weighted in favour of the abusers, who, for me, should not even be walking the streets.
No, listen, you've said that with great passion and great feeling, and I absolutely understand why, and I'm sure everyone watching and listening to that feels very much as you do. But the heart of the matter, and the reason we have protracted, lengthy battles when it comes to deporting foreign criminals, when it comes to deporting terrorists, when it comes to deporting those who come to this country with no rightful claim across the English Channel by small boat, is because we're signed up to the European Convention on Human Rights. We've written it into UK law with the Human Rights Act. And it really means that the police and the courts in the end go round in circles for year after year. Is it time we left ECHR? Is it time we actually dealt with just British law without that interference?
You know what, Nigel? I feel, after my journey, the last 10 years, I have seen corruption at the highest level. And I have seen how, you only look at this case. time and time again. I do believe that innocent people do need some protection from the authorities that would otherwise trample all over them. But what I would also say is that these men have had millions in legal aid. We should be using our system to protect those who need protecting. I don't think the issue here is human rights. I think the issue here is that very clever lawyers find a loophole and exploit that at the expense of victims. Anybody in this country listening to what we're saying now would feel that this is not a human right. This is actually not right. It comes down to right and wrong. And there are some things that are so wrong that Human Rights Act or not, they are wrong. These men were released from prison on parole. They never showed any remorse. The system should not have released them. There are failures right through this whole shebang. Where were the representations on behalf of the victims in this case? There are so many flaws in the system. I think to say that the European...
No, I agree with you. I agree with you.
You know, that the treaty itself is there, whether it's run by Europe or not. I would like a body other than the police and the courts to go to when I am being trampled all over.
Well,
because
Maggie, I mean, before the Human Rights Act, beginning with Magna Carta and evolving ever since then, I think we had a pretty good, pretty fair judicial system that did actually give rights, far more rights and far more liberty, perhaps, than other European countries. We'll debate that another time, but I think the essence of what is going on here, you've put your finger on. This is about right and wrong, and what is happening thus far in terms of deportations is wrong. And I thank you very much for coming on the programme this evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nigel.
Well, it's very, I mean, you know, Maggie Oliver there, very, very passionate indeed about that case. And she, of course, had to deal with all of this horrendous stuff at first hand.